跟大家说一下啊，首先，
Well, first I would like to make an announcement.
发信人员、工作人员啊。
Staff members of different positions of different departments. Since this is the beginning of the summer, spring, summer, during this time, the management team of different departments, the supervising compos and commos, should be making discussions in meetings in terms of how to run the Sangha. Some Sanghas, some compos and commos really place great importance in making such decisions and communications, but some are not. Though I don't have that much time to make visits to each and every one of the departments, but I try to get the overall information from all the departments. Mostly people of different departments, the staff members, and other members. My suggestion is that when it comes to your work, your service to the Sangha, as well as your study and practice, you should try to avoid distraction and try to engage in your work and study thoroughly, all the way from the beginning to the end. So please don't get so distracted. Overall, after my understanding of all different aspects, including Dharmapala, the hotel, and our library, and all that, there are some small issues, but that's just normal. As long as there are people, there are some small issues. But I think overall, everything is fine. Now, the clinic is currently running as well, but I'm not too sure about how the management is. So I hope that the relevant management team and the supervisors should pay attention and ask how they're running their management and how the services are, and so on. Also, you need to pay attention to how the staff members are in terms of their livelihood, in terms of their living situations, their food. I think majority of the places, such as the shop that we have over here, everything's running fine. I went to the shop a few days ago, as well as the copy and print room. I heard that there is only one copy and print room in the library, in the Lotus Continent Library. Lots of lamas and jomos would go there and print materials. However, that library is only set up to fulfill the demands of the Sangha within, or the people within the Lotus Continental Library. There is, in fact, another copy and print room in the male Sangha's member, because when we look at the grand total of the population in Larangar, the lamas alone who are eligible to stay here are of 1,500, and plus there are staff members and people who provide other services and so on. For that reason, I think it's better to start using the male's quarters copy and print room. Now I hope that the management team, the supervisors, should pay attention to these kinds of details. If the management do not pay attention to it, if the management or supervisor do not care for the various aspects of the department, then it's very easy for the department to fail and fall apart quickly. And for people who need services, medical services, we have lots of male Sangha members who serve at the males clinic as well. Some are monastic, some are lay practitioners, and they're quite excellent. I also heard that Dr. Yu provided the service to the Sangha, also provided Sangha from the library. If we were to travel afar to treat our illness or to get a checkup, then it's rather sometimes could be quite difficult. But now we have such a wonderful doctor who are quite proficient and very skilled to provide service over here. That is really wonderful. Of course, if you're not sick, I would suggest you not to get a checkup so that you don't add the workload to the doctors. They're not robots. They had to work really hard. There are, of course, the development of the AI doctors, the robotic doctors that's in development. If we have those kinds of services, of course, we don't have to worry. Anyhow, if you have certain skills, if you can provide service with your skills to the Sangha, I think that's really wonderful. I myself, I'm serving the Sangha every day. I serve the Sangha in terms of having meetings with the authorities, having meetings with the benefactors, having meetings with the fellow Sangha members. I have meetings every day. But I'm not having meetings for myself. I'm having meetings so that various kinds of things can be done through those meetings for the Sangha. If I were to do that for myself, then that is not a pure act of pure motivation, but I'm participating in the meetings to benefit the entire Sangha. So I have this pure aspiration and motivation. I heard that the male Sangha last year, lots of them who got high grades actually were also involved in various staffing and service to the Sangha. Well, this may not sound very good, but I would still like to say it. There are people who are good at everything. They can serve the Sangha at the same time, study and contemplate, and who are also excellent in both aspects of it. I have been serving the Sangha the past few decades, and also I'm studying and contemplating on my own as well. While I serve the Sangha through various kinds of activities, I still continue to give Dharma teachings, though not maybe my numbers of teachings are not the most compared to the other lamas and the other Khenpos and Khenmos, however, definitely not the least. At the same time, I engage in my own practice of chanting, of meditation, and I had never interrupted with my own practice, never neglected my own practice. When it comes to practice, when it comes to various kinds of work. I don't consider myself as being the best, but definitely not the worst. Also, I'm exerting my best. Gunnar once said that you should not follow the ones who seems to have already given up on everything. There are people who at first would think that they have given up on everything, especially the beginners. But maybe they couldn't give up on anything at all afterwards. I'm just stressing on the importance of your own study and practice. The management and the supervisors should also exert your effort. If we can work in synergy, then everything could run smoothly as a Sangha. The next aspect is that we need to pay attention to the constructions, the houses, the overall outlook of Larongar. People nowadays pay so much attention to how everything appears to be, and we need to try our best to provide convenience and services to the Sangha at the same time to make sure that everything is pleasant to look at. We recently built a Lotus Continent restaurant, and after many meetings, after lots of effort, I've heard quite a bit of good feedback. What is quite a headache to us right now is that Larong Hotel. Initially, I suggested that some of our management team from our hotel and restaurant could also join in effort in the management of the Larong Hotel as well. We tried in various kinds of aspects to exert our effort. I just had a meeting with them yesterday, and the results weren't quite ideal. I've mentioned to them that now Larong Hotel doesn't have a main manager. If the Jomos were to run the hotel solely, I'm not so sure how the hotel will turn out later on in various aspects. Now, if you are experienced in hotel management, if you're enthusiastic, and if you have a good character, experienced, skilled, and good character, those are necessary. Then you can step in, and we'll see how we can use your skills and experience in running this hotel. The hotel has been in construction for 2 years, and it doesn't seem like there is a progress. You may think that I am probably meddling too much with various aspects of the management of Larongar. But I think majority of people nowadays at Larongar tend to seek for their own comfort. And then if that's the case, nothing will be done. So someone had to step in and do something. I told the hotel that on the 1st of May, the hotel must be open to business. Even if they do not have enough utensils, they can borrow some plates from the hotel, the Dharmapala Hotel, and borrow some pots from the Laronggar's Grand Hotel, the BHC over there. So that's what I told them. Well, what I meant is that initially the Jomos should be in management of that hotel. However, at the beginning, I think we need to help them out. And then slowly they will be able to run the hotel themselves. The different aspects, the different departments in Laronggar need to run properly. It is not that I wish Laronggar to be a business because government doesn't give us much of autonomy in running those. However, what we can do is to exert our effort in running these kinds of services and running these kinds of infrastructures properly and build the buildings and constructions properly. Majority of our infrastructures are done, but sometimes the hardwares are done, but the software still need quite a bit of upgrade. And we need to learn how to utilize different kinds of resources, and especially if we have the resources. If we have people, especially the members who wish to serve in management team, who are experienced in management, I think we should have sufficient members to serve the Sangha in general, but we need people who are experienced in management. Last few days when I had the meetings with them, I didn't get upset with them in the meeting. However, the way they are running, the way they are dealing with the workload is rather quite distracted and quite lax. I've heard that some of our staff members are serving at the Jomo side and are doing whatever is needed. I've told them that on the 24th, I will pay an inspection and everything should be done. I'm calling for skilled, experienced management members who were experienced in hotel management and willing to serve the Sangha in that position for a year or two. And then if you are, you can submit your name and your resume to the front desk of the hotel. Chinese or Tibetan, doesn't matter. Now we have some young Tibetan staff members and some seniors as well. I hope that you can try to hire more Tibetans, because it's hard to find a job for the Tibetans. In the recent years, my effort is placed on the employment of the Tibetans. If the Tibetans could find, if one of the Tibetans could find a job, then that is quite helpful to the entire family. Tibetans tend to be maybe a bit too relaxed at the beginning, and then maybe at the very beginning they need to be trained, and then slowly they will get used to it. Also, being a manager, being in that management position sometimes they tend to hire people of their own ethnicity, which is completely understandable. However, I think that it is necessary to take care of the Tibetan youngsters because they are of good characters. Maybe just very few of them do not have good characters, but majority of them are of good characters. They're very steady. They definitely could compete with the other ethnicities in terms of their personality and characters. When it comes to their habits, when it comes to their traditional thinking, maybe there are some differences. But slowly, people will get used to it. At the very beginning, the Chinese, when they came to Larangar, Ponzo Rinpoche received all of the Chinese with great inclusiveness because the Chinese at first didn't fit into the environment or fit into the habitual ways of the Tibetans. But we really open up our hearts and our mind to embrace the Chinese Sangha. If we can embrace the Tibetan youth nowadays, we can benefit them both in finance as well as in Dharma studies, because if they were to live here, they will be able to receive the Dharma teachings. This is my suggestion. I really hope that the different departments can hire the Tibetans. That being said, I hope that the Tibetans, after hearing me saying that, do not get too arrogant and saying that because Khenpo said so, so you have to hire me. We need to be both understanding. The Khenpos recently reported to me that some of the young Tibetans in their discipline, their behavior, if they were to break the rules, then I hope the management team and the disciplinary supervisors can step in and correct their behaviors. If they were to have behavior and discipline issues, there is no need to tolerate them. In this way, it could benefit everyone. This is something I wanted to address before the class. Now, my point in general is that at the beginning of spring, summer, the management team should actually go to the sites to inspect construction and so on. Khenpo and I went to the various different places, such as places where we usually would chant for the deceased and all that. The Khenpos and Khenmos, I call upon all of you to do the same, to actually pay a visit to the departments. For example, today after inquiring about why all the printers do not supply the needs, cannot meet the demands of the Sangha, I got to know that because recently I wanted to get the print of the Dharmapada Ki Gatha Sutra that was translated by Devashantika. Many would argue that this particular sutra is considered as the key sutra of Buddhism, just as how the Bible is the key reading to Christianity, and Quran is the key textbook, the key text for the Muslim. Initially, I wanted to give teachings on that sutra, and then I thought that well, maybe I should get a copy of it. And then after inquiring preparing it, I got the response that the printers do not meet the need and we couldn't print it and there is no copy of it. So I decided maybe it's probably too difficult to understand, and then I decided not to give teachings on it. Well, the printing room that we have now is currently really short because the manager of the printing room, her name is Yuan Zhou, and she's really short. So she built that room based on her own height. You're just not here right now, is she? Many people know her. She usually would build different houses, and whatever kinds of houses and the structures that she built is really short, and we had to enter with our heads down. I think back then, printing texts shouldn't be too difficult. I'm not sure now what is going on. I hope the departments and all the staff members and managers should pay attention to this. We shouldn't be too scared. And we shouldn't be too fearful. We need to be more courageous. Or maybe too much. Maybe I've already talked too much.
Garte kung chover kirna di ranga lam lab jipte yonan tamchit nyambrin jirwa yino. Zo pi yondan tsitrim la shope kyang randa mepa mela zopa gomba kanzigla toptan dambi kebe jiv shago. Kanzig janji tsignan tikche lav dirtsi tongwa janda mufchowa kanzigna lamla jigbam keba ji mufshate de jivshir jena Zerdanga Nipena, Gechu Tamship, Labarashid, Yanjak Tamshin, Jombrashi, Tsin Dodon, Shimar Namsagan, Zanjim Tongra, Mando Brashedo. Dina Zerdanga Semdo, Mechimbo, Tarta, Shibra Shene, Tirlak, Marniper, Start of Jungrusha Guso, Yondan Tamchim Chobir Kumbona, Zerdan Labazi Mena, Chimbirki or Nam, Dopa Tanda Lenja, Lamlap Shopa Maimbe, Ranyan Dervan Mani President Kevin Jernagang, Rapto Shonwar Namna, Lamla Shochan, Dopar Ponwa Yembe, Zer Damar Kirna, Chi Mirk by Yente, Huerna Namka Tang with Chenle, Namka Tang with Chenle, Tongjik Mestim Chepa, Namka Tang with Chenle, Namka Tang with Chenle, Chepa Gendar Neme Pa, you know. Gerlon ta chak ki rangum gola rakpar shine ranglaf takpar sharte gyan tamchir ponjang ku ngangun ku longzi kirnot tognen soab surnyum bar shod garti ngar janjan jagpar tirna mirdar pon shago ngarjir dan jagba chechir perna kimbi kiwu kukar janla yang marigna Ganjik tamchidar pangnen soab surnyum lajik badang tarwa tondang nirwi raptor shungwa namla shmu maggoso.
Well, let us continue with our class. Yesterday we stopped at the place where we talked about the faults that's generated from indulging in sleeping. As I stated yesterday, I believe everyone became aware of it after the class. Yesterday I said that I will resume my schedule of getting up early. Recently I've been sleeping in a bit than my normal schedule, and I thought I have to get back to my regular schedule of getting up early, but it's been a little bit difficult this morning. I do think it will take maybe 2 more days to get back to my regular schedule. I think it's necessary for us to get up early. Once it becomes a habit, it's a little bit difficult to change. However, it is necessary. We shouldn't be too lazy while staying here, because we need to remember our goal of staying here. We're here to study. We're not here to enjoy great comfort. We're not here to indulge in sleeping. Therefore, as I said, we should be aware of our schedule and we should be aware of impermanence, really. As we studied yesterday, that the fire of impermanence can destroy everything in this world. I think it's quite important. We have to remember that the fire of impermanence will destroy everything in the phenomena. The fellow practitioners, including some Khenpos and Khenmos, I think you don't really practice impermanence enough. The way to practice upon impermanence is to, for example, by observing the season changes, by observing the changes that happens in people around you, and especially the death of the friends and family members. And whenever you hear such kind of news, there is a sense of deep insights that should arise and remind you of impermanence. However, people nowadays don't really feel anything like that at all. This is very much rooted in your lack of practice upon impermanence. We should really contemplate very deeply and at all times that the fire of impermanence can destroy everything in this world, including ourselves, really. After a few years, we should contemplate upon how many of us would still be able to live in this world and how many people would die in this crowd, in this cohort. Nobody knows what's going to happen next year. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody knows if we're still going to live tomorrow. So this indeed is quite important to remember about the impact of impermanence and the existence of impermanence. We have to develop a sense of certainty in impermanence. And then to continue over here, it says the thieves of afflictions are always about to kill you, even more than your mortal enemies. If we were to sleep every day, in fact, the thief of sleep can destroy you at any time. We don't know that it's there, and slowly, because it's a thief, so slowly it can steal all of our wisdom and our provisions, our merits. We have no way of knowing it from time to time. That's one way of explaining it. And the other one is that because such kind of thief is hidden in our mind stream, it's very difficult to find. It's difficult to observe it than the mortal enemies. We have to remind ourselves afflictions are just like this kind of thief that's hidden and could create more detrimental results to ourselves than any other foes. It could destroy our it could push us to create more negative karmic retributions, and then slowly that would destroy our present life and even lifetimes. Therefore, if we are not aware of it, we would be the poorest person in this world. That is very sad. So we have to remind ourselves with this kind of teaching at all times. So the afflictions are like thieves. On the other hand, they are also like the poisonous serpents of affliction is sleeping in your mind, just as if a black viper the black viper is of the most poisonous. A black viper, if it was asleep in your room, in your bed, if you do not know that there is a black viper sleeping in your bed, wouldn't that be terrifying? Without knowing it, once you get into your bed and there is a black viper, would you sleep with it and say, "Oh, hi, viper," and then give it a kiss? Would you do that? Definitely not, right? In fact, in Larangar, we had lots of snakes. Even before I came to Larangar, I've heard about the snakes over here. I remember that I went to Lama Diksha's home, and when I was visiting his attendant, Lama Garbar, who told me the stories of how he remembered about the snakes in Larangar. He said that when he was receiving the empowerment of the 4 Ningtis from Phontsok Rinpoche, he said that where Phontsok Rinpoche is, in that valley, there were many, many snakes. I was very curious back then and thinking about how the snakes would be if it's everywhere. Nowadays, maybe because we have many houses, we don't really see snakes anymore. I remembered also at the beginning, I borrowed a house and stayed in Larangar at that time. The house at the time didn't really have any floors. There was once that there was a snake that just creeps up in the ground, and it really startled me, and slowly it swam away. Another story I remembered was that when Phontsok Rinpoche was giving us teachings, there was one old Khenpo. He couldn't really walk well, and he was sitting on one side of the door, and then all of a sudden he stood up and started yelling, "There's a bhikshu, there's a bhikshu." In fact, according to the Tibetan's tradition, we don't really call snakes because the snakes have lots of anger and hatred in their in them. Therefore, if you were to call them snakes, they would gather even more hatred and aggression. Therefore, we usually would call them bhikshus. If you call them bhikshus, they'll get happy. So the Khenpo all of a sudden jumped up and said, "There's a bhikshu, there's a bhikshu." The shrine hall back then were very simple, very humble, and there were holes everywhere on the floor. All of a sudden, there was a bhikshu would come up. There were many bhikshus back then, the so-called bhikshus back then in Larangar. We probably don't really have bhikshus everywhere, but I'm not quite sure. Later, when you get back home, you have to check your bed and see if there is a bhikshu hiding there. And in the sutra over here, it says that one should use the stick to get the viper away, and that stick or the hook is the hook of precept. So you should engage in study and contemplation at the beginning and the later part of the evening, and engaging in diligence. This is the kind of precepts that you should take. So once shooing away the snake, then you can engage in your practice, because if there is a viper in your bed, you won't sleep with it. Once the sleeping snake is gone, then you can rest at ease. We usually would say that if you can see snake is considered as auspicious. That means that you have a good connection with the Naga. If you were to anger the Nagas, or if the Naga is not happy with you, you won't be able to even have the chances to see the snakes and frogs. If there are people who were to see snakes, that means you have a good relation with the Naga king. In the sutra, it says that then you can rest at ease once the sleeping snake is gone. The rest at ease doesn't mean that you can take sleep as much as you want. It doesn't mean that. It means that once the black viper is gone, then you can rest at the middle part of the night in an appropriate period of time. Because if you don't take any rest at all, then your body won't be able to handle such kind of your physical body won't be able to handle it either. So from certain aspect, it is important to sleep. However, you shouldn't sleep or indulge in sleeping. What I feel is that for some of our beginners and the newly ordained monastics, it is important for you to take some rest in an appropriate amount of time. And for the kind of practitioners who've studied for many years, you should remind yourself you need to practice with diligence. Otherwise, there are people who slowly get more and more lazy. I myself sometimes would feel the same, that when I first came here, I was very diligent. And now I feel that, maybe I should take some rest. We should definitely rest at an appropriate appropriate in an appropriate limitation. We shouldn't dwell in it. Otherwise, if we don't practice, if we don't seize the timing in our lifetime, it's very hard to say what we would become in next lifetime. At least if you were to practice with great diligence, you will be sure that you won't fall into the three lower realms. Therefore, we have to have a sense of diligence in our heart and force ourselves to practice more and more virtuous deeds. But I feel that people nowadays are very different. There are the ones who are very diligent. They will engage in various kinds of diligent and virtuous activities such as reciting and going to classes and so on. They're the ones who don't really engage in any of those virtuous deeds at all. They are the ones who can remember and memorize lots of books, and they are the ones who can't memorize any verses at all. There are the ones who've practiced the nongzhou, and they're the ones who just couldn't finish the nongzhou practice at all. The male practitioners especially, I do think that though you have lots of duties and you probably serve at many posts to serve the Sangha, but I do want you to pay attention to how many lamas would practice at 5 a.m. in the main shrine hall. It is not cold right now. In fact, the weather is very pleasant. If you were to sleep until the sun's out and then you would stretch and then start to rub your eyes, this is not good. You have to have a sense of diligence, right? I'm not yarning. I am simply mimicking all of you.
这样的，然后那个就是这个是就如果不处这个睡眠的话，那就是那么这个人叫做是无产之人
Those who sleep, even though the snake has not yet gone, are without shame.
就是无产之人，就是这个是无产之人。
So this kind of person would be considered as without any shame at all. The clothing of shame among all adornments is the very best. If a person knows what is shameful and what is the bottom line, then that is considered as the most beautiful adornment one can have. People nowadays would adorn themselves with all kinds of adornments and accessories and gold and silver bracelets and so on and so forth. One may feel that I'm all dressed up with all kinds of adornments, I am the most beautiful. But that is not necessarily true. In fact, the most beautiful clothing, the most important and magnifying and magnificent adornment that one could have is knowing shame, knowing what is one's principle and what should be practiced and what shouldn't be practiced. For the one who knows what kind of actions that need to be abandoned and what kind of actions need to be uptake and what kind of actions are considered as the bottom line, this is really important. According to Mipa Rinpoche, he said that if one were to have a sense of shame, then one can eradicate the kind of actions that is lazy and is completely wrong. But if a person do not know shame, then what's the function of giving teachings then? What's the function of studying and listening to teachings, and what's the function of observing precepts? What's the function of wearing beautiful clothing if a person do not know shame? A person who is shameless, in fact, such kind of person is probably even worse than the ones who walk about naked. Mipa Rinpoche taught this in the teachings of the mundane and transmundane. There's a whole chapter where he gives teachings on knowing shame and and knowing the limitation of his or her own actions. There are people who would consider, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, otherwise people would see me in certain ways. Otherwise, my teacher is going to see me in a different way or scold me. On one hand, people may feel that this looks like this person still have grasping, but in this relative way, in fact, it is quite needed. If a person do not have a sense of shame, then any kinds of contemplation and study and practice won't create any changes on that person. Observing precepts won't be done by that person. Therefore, shame can be compared to an iron barb which can restrain people from doing evil. We should not give up knowing what shame is and knowing the limitation of your actions. If you were to give up your principles and do not know any shameful actions, then all of the merits would be seized. I remember in the Iko Agama, where it in fact also has a chapter on shame where it gives lots of teachings. It says that the senior monastics as well as the young monastics, they have to know what shame is. There are people who would say that, oh, I don't grasp onto anything, it's fine, let it go, don't care about it. There are lots of young people who don't know what shame is. But you should definitely understand what is shame and what kind of actions should be abandoned. Otherwise, people would feel that they are quite embarrassing. There are people who don't care about those at all. And if you don't care about all of those, then all of the so-called precepts and your actions and your morality will be unconstrained, and that could lead to horrifying results. Therefore, as a Buddhist practitioner, we should not give up our own principles. We should not give up to have a mind of knowing what shame is. According to the teachings, the essential teachings of Dhammapada, it says that if one were to know what shame is, then they can accomplish wisdom. In terms of the three studies, the samadhi, precepts, and wisdom, in fact, only people who has a limitation and knowing what shame is, they would be able to have the opportunity to accomplish all of those. If you were to feel that, oh, I'm here to practice, however, I do not know, I do not need to abide and practice appropriately, then you won't be able to accomplish any virtuous deeds. Therefore, you should always have a sense of shame and not be without it even for a moment. For if you have no sense of shame, you will lose all of your merit and virtue. It says over here, those who have shame have good dharmas. One without it is no different from the birds and beasts. According to Parinirvana Sutra, it says that there are the two kinds of virtuous dharmas and could save the sentient beings. The first one is to know the limitation, and the other one is to know what should be when and what one would engage in that would embarrass oneself. So you have to know the limitation and know what would embarrass you, what would be embarrassing. If you don't know any of those, if you don't know the two aspects of shame, then this kind of person is no other than an animal. So in terms of shame, there are two aspects. In fact, the two aspects, we've already taught about it and studied it in Abhidharma. But today, the explanation I found in Parinirvana Sutra is more in detail. Therefore, I really hope that you can look into it and make a comparison to it. In fact, some of the teachings in this sutra, some of the great masters also quoted from the Parinirvana Sutra, quoted from the later two verses where it says that the ones who do not have a sense of shame are not considered as human. They are in fact of no difference than the animals. Master Oyi, Master Vasubandhu, and many great masters, in fact, did not quote from that. However, I do think that we should understand indeed knowing shame, knowing limitation, knowing what would embarrass you are the two very important virtuous deeds that one should uptake. You have to understand it in great detail, especially that kind of explanation according to Parinirvana Sutra. In the another translation of the Agama Sutra, where it says that there was once the Buddha went to a city and he saw that a Shramana who did not practice appropriately in terms of his body and even his mind. And then at that time, the Shramana all of a sudden, once upon seeing the Buddha was there, he appeared to be very embarrassed, and he lowered his head and was quite embarrassed of himself. And the Buddha said that, excellent, excellent. When upon seeing me, you generated a little bit of shame, and then if bhikshus, bhikshunis, upasakas, and upasikas, upon seeing them, if you can generate such kind of shame as well, then that would generate a great benefit and happiness for yourself in the long night. Whenever you see someone is not being very appropriate with his actions, when a person is engaging in inappropriate actions, and all of a sudden, if he were to see the Buddha, they would definitely be startled. And at that time, upon seeing the Buddha, he was paying reverence and lowering the head and also being quite embarrassed at the same time. That is excellent. Similarly, if your action is not appropriate, and then when your action is inappropriate, if you were to see your teacher, if you were to see the manager, then right away you should generate a sense of embarrassment and a sense of shame. And when you feel that, you would understand that you are aware of how your actions are inappropriate. The Buddha did not scold him by saying that, why did you practice the inappropriate actions? Rather, he said, excellent and excellent. He said that not everyone, in fact, not everyone's actions are going to be excellent at all times, especially as beginners. It's very difficult. However, at least you understand what should be done and what should be abandoned. And this is the kind of action of a wise one. At least you know when your action is inappropriate, you are still quite embarrassed by it. This is the action of the wise one. This is really important. What we're studying right now, this is the very important teaching that's given by the Buddha right before he passed into parinirvana. That is, we have to know our limitation. We have to feel embarrassed by the things that whenever we are inappropriate in terms of our actions and so on. We have to observe ourselves with the right mindfulness. This is really important. And then in the next part, the Buddha started to talk about anger. The Buddha talked about the sense of shame, and then he started to talk about anger now. The Buddha said that all of you bhikshus, even if a person dismembered you piece by piece, joint by joint, your mind should be self-contained. Do not allow yourself to become angry. Moreover, you should guard your mouth and not give rise to evil speech. In fact, over here, he said that if a person were to harm you with anger, with great aggression, and then even cut your physical body piece by piece, dismember you piece by piece and joint by joint, even at that time, you should not generate any aggression. At that time, not only you shouldn't generate any aggression to the other person, you should try your best to protect your speech and not give rise to any evil speech out of anger. Not speaking any rough speech, any coarse speech. In fact, if you do not guard your three gates by practicing patience, if you were to generate any anger, that would definitely be an obstacle on your path, and you would lose all the merit of being a Mahayana practitioner. In fact, the kind of level of practice that's taught over here is very high. Just think about how when a person is slandering you, cursing you, and harming you with their physical body, and even harm you in all various ways. As a Mahayana practitioner, we shouldn't revenge at all. We shouldn't be like the worldly people or even the states nowadays. We can see that how among people and even between different states, they would try to take revenge upon one another. As the Mahayana practitioner, we shouldn't do that at all. Whenever we encounter any kinds of situations that may bring us unhappiness and even harm, we shouldn't generate aggression in our mind. Otherwise, that would obscure us on the path and would then destroy all the merits that we've accumulated. According to the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra, it says that out of all afflictions, the anger is of the most severe. Out of all the unvirtuous negative deeds, aggression is of the most detrimental. So out of all the 84,000 afflictions, the most severe is aggression. According to Avatamsaka Sutra, it talked about all kinds of obstacles that could be brought forth by aggression. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of obscurations that could be brought forth by aggression, such as many illness, such as not having the opportunity to listen to the correct Dharma, such as dullness, such as unsuccessful on the path of practice, and so on and so forth. Therefore, all kinds of the evil deeds would manifest if you were to generate anger. I remember a great master once said that if you were to generate anger, even for one moment, even if it is only one thought of anger, then thousands, in fact millions of doors of obscuration, of obstacles wouldn't open up for that person. Therefore, even one moment of anger that arise in you, millions of obstacles would appear. The Buddha also stated in Avatamsaka Sutra, he said that I do not see there is any negative deeds that can be conducted which would surpass that of anger. So this is indeed the most severe out of all on the path of Mahayana. So we have to try to control our aggression. If we can't control aggression, then doesn't matter how diligent you are, doesn't matter how pure you try to observe your precepts, it doesn't matter how much you're practicing in meditation and all kinds of merits, whatever merits you have, in a very short moment of time, in fact, anger would destroy all the provisions of merit that you've been accumulating for a long period of time. Therefore, the hardest for the practitioners to control is really the mind of aggression. When we do not encounter any unfavorable conditions, we can be very gentle and even tempered. However, whenever we encounter anything that would generate anger, or whenever there's any obscuration or any obstacles, then we would generate lots of anger. Now we should understand that anger is indeed quite horrifying. It could lead us to a horrifying result. According to some commentary of the last Bequeathed, where it in fact quoted from the great masters, it says that the mundane beings would think that what is the most supreme is that if one can win over the other, let it be fighting or through different quarrels, if one were to win over the other one, then the mundane being would feel that that's the best strength that one has. They would feel that if I were to be able to compete and win, then that is considered as the strength. But the bodhisattvas do not feel the same way. In fact, the value of the bodhisattvas are that if they were to be able to give the benefit to the others, that's considered as the best kind of winning, the greatest triumph. As a mundane being, usually we would feel that if two people were fighting against each other, the winning party would feel that I am the best, I triumphed in this competition. But for the bodhisattvas, they would feel exactly different. They would feel that if they were able to give the benefit to the others, and if the other person could win or triumph, that is the best kind of triumph for the bodhisattvas. We can see that the angles are completely different. The bodhisattva's triumph is considered as the constant triumph. The beneficial seed and the beneficial strength would continuously generate within their mind stream. However, the so-called triumph of the mundane beings would only generate arrogance and ignorance. And the fruition of such would definitely be received at appropriate time, at the time whenever it comes to maturation. The mundane beings usually would feel that we have to win, we have to compete, and we have to win over the others, or we have to trump the others. That's the goal, and that's the value of mundane being. I have to be the winner party. For the bodhisattvas, rather, their value systems are completely different. They would feel that as long as they can benefit the others, then that would be the greatest. Because there are times where the mundane beings don't have any senses and can't be argued with because they are of lack of a sense of wisdom. Therefore, the bodhisattvas would think that, okay, so I will offer the victory to you. The mundane beings would feel that, oh, I have to win the competition, I have to be the one that would triumph the other. However, the bodhisattvas think of the exact different way. The bodhisattvas, in fact, have the most supreme victory. Such kind of victory would bring about all the virtuous strength as well as the virtuous seeds of the others. But the mundane beings would do exactly the vice. That is why the greatest ones would practice patience. The French poet Victor Hugo once said that the greatest men are the ones who practice patience. Because the greatest one would be the best in terms of inclusiveness and in terms of letting the others to enjoy victory and benefits. Even in a worldly sense, we would say that the ones who, for example, who are humble and who benefit the others, those are the great people. And then to continue, the Buddha said that if you're unable to happily and patiently undergo the poison of malicious abuse, as if drinking sweet dew, you cannot be called a wise person who has entered the way. It means that even if there are people, for example, slander you, curse you, such kind of slandering and such kind of harm should be taken by a practitioner as sweet dew, as nectars, and receive all of those with great happiness. Just like great masters of the past, whenever they are being slandered and cursed even and harmed physically, they would receive it with great happiness, as if they're enjoying the nectar. If you can do so, then you have truly entered onto the path, and you can truly be called as the wise person. I encourage all of you to look into the news between countries, between people. In fact, we can see that all of them would interact with one another with the three poisons, and it is quite horrifying. Every one of the mundane beings would be very self-centered and then would harm the others at all times, as if they are spraying the poisonous water to the others. That's how the mundane beings are. They're constantly competing who has better and more strength, and who's going to triumph over the other. That's how the human histories are written and were going about. But the actions and behaviors of the Mahayana Bodhisattvas are completely different. Why is this over here? The Buddha continued to say, the harm from anger ruins all good dharmas and destroys one's good reputation. People of the present and of the future will not even wish to see this person. Even if you look really beautiful, even if you have the highest social status and have the most amount of wealth, people won't be happy to see. Won't be happy to see you at all either. You should know that a heart of anger is worse than a fierce fire. In the past, in the words of my perfect teacher, you probably have heard the story where someone stated that, oh, this bhikshu is very good, but has too much anger. Then Patrul Rinpoche stated that there is nothing worse than the action of being angry. How could someone have lots of anger be a good practitioner? That is not possible. According to the medium Agama Sutra, where it says that if we were to get close and affiliate ourselves with kind person and part ourselves with the ones with great anger, then it is of great benefit. But if we don't do so, our reputation would get tinted as well. Even in a small circle, for example, if we were to find some people to staff in our department or in our sangha, in a community, and then if we were to hear that this person has lots of anger, then we would say, no, we don't want that. We don't want this person to be in our department, even if this person has the title of a Kempo Kemo or Dharma teacher or a PhD. As long as this person has lots of anger, then that person would have the reputation of not being wanted. Therefore, it's quite important to practice right mindfulness and observe such kind of anger that is just like a viper. Otherwise, once this kind of anger being exposed to the others, people will remember you in such a way. We can see that anger indeed is worse than a thief, because it could not only destroy your present life, it could also destroy all the favorable conditions for future lifetimes. Why some people doesn't look beautiful in this lifetime? It is because they probably threaten the others and curse the others in their previous life with the mind of aggression. And vice versa. In fact, there are people who look beautiful because they've practiced great patience in their previous life. So one should understand that a heart of anger is worse than a fire. We often would say that aggression is just like a great fire. Some people from our construction team also would say that you have to pay attention. I'm going to rage, and when I rage, it's like a great fire, and it's quite scary. And whenever they have such kind of anger, everyone would get threatened. There was once that we had a meeting, a person all of a sudden started to rage and started to curse the others. A couple over there said that I can observe from their voice and observe from their speech, and I will be able to see how long they've spent in Larungar, and there are people who may be very good in the technical sense, but they probably are terrible in their practice. Though some of our staff members, in order to serve the Sangha, sometimes they have to get angry because they do care. But your action and your speech shouldn't be exactly the same as the worldly beings. Otherwise, it is quite horrifying, especially for the monastics. According to Vasubandhu's commentary, he said that one should protect one's own virtuous deeds, just like how one tried to prevent the great fire. So we should protect our virtuous deeds, just as if we're trying to protect ourselves not to be on fire. And one should protect others' virtuous deeds as if we're trying to prevent the thieves and robbers. Because once the robbers are here, then they will rob all of the things, and then there's no way to benefit the others if you don't have any wealth of your own. So anger is just like a fire that could destroy your own virtuous deeds. Nowadays, I've heard that in order to prevent fire, everyone has to write down your name to register whenever you purchase a little lighter. There are people, for example, you can, in fact, nowadays I heard that people living in this area, they can only buy one lighter per family. And even if a person were to smoke one cigarette, they have to, in the open, they will be under arrest for 15 days. So fire is quite scary indeed, we can see from all of those preventions. Also, anger may be excusable in lay people who indulge in desires and in people who do not cultivate the way, tread onto the path. In fact, for the lay practitioners, because they do have to take care of their families and they do have to engage in all kinds of worldly affairs, so they can't, when they can't control their anger, they still have excuses. However, for a monastic, since you've already given up everything, there is nothing that you desire in this world, then if the monastics can't control their anger, then over here the Buddha said that in people who do not cultivate, for people who have left home life and who cultivate the way and are without desire, harboring anger is impermissible. Lots of the lay practitioners, I think some of the, many of whom are in fact even better than the monastics in many ways, especially I feel that they're very inclusive and they engage in diligent practice. But some monastics, they got ordained because of some obstacles, because of their livelihood and because of their work, because of their personal relationship and so on and so forth. Maybe the intention of their ordination were wrong to start with. They only abandoned this family life because of those obstacles that they don't want to face. And for this kind of people, after ordination, it seems that their characteristics are still the same. Their mind is still not tamed after ordination. And over here, the Buddha said that for this type of people, whom though have already shaved off their hair and start wearing robes, but what's the use of it? If they cannot work with anger, if they cannot tame their mind, then they are worse even than those who are the lay practitioners. And then the Buddha continued to say, without a clear, cool cloud, there should be a sudden blazing clash of thunder. Nowadays, we say that, well, how could you monastic do so? You shouldn't do that. I used to say that, well, monastics still have afflictions. So if you have afflictions, we're also mundane beings. We also have afflictions. But over here, the Buddha said that the monastics are different than the lay practitioners, because the lay practitioners still have various tethers and they still have excuses. I remember a few years ago, I was having a meeting, and then we were having a meeting with this authority, and throughout the whole process, we had lots of evidence in our arguments, but they did not. A Khenpo was very sharp in his argument, and then the authority said that, well, you wear the red robe, I don't wear the red robe, but I'm practicing very good in terms of patience. That's a little bit different. But anyhow, a few days ago, I was talking to another authority, and I got a little bit overzealous, and the other person didn't feel impatient at all, and he kept on consoling me, and I felt a little bit embarrassed. Anyhow, monastics definitely should pay attention to their actions, especially in terms of anger. Otherwise, if we were to wear this robe and at the same time being angry at the others and even curse the others, that is very inappropriate. Cursing and even fighting with others, that is completely inappropriate and unacceptable. So don't bring that kind of habitual patterns into the monastic sangha. We have to know our limitations, our bottom lines, and we have to know shame. We have to know that we are monastics and we shouldn't do all of those kinds of things. The later part, then, the Buddha started to, after this, the Buddha started to talk about arrogance. The Buddha said that all of you bhikshus, you should rub your heads, for you have relinquished the fine adornments. You wear the garments of a Buddhist monk, so you should definitely touch your head, and you've already shaved off all of your hair. And what's the reason of that? You have to think about the reason for it, your goal of renouncing all of this. Did you shave it off for your own reason, or did you shave it off by requesting your teacher or other reasons? It is not that some of the authorities ask you to, it is rather you asked to shave it off yourself. As a monastic, since you've already given up the earrings and nose rings and necklace and all kinds of adornment, and even the very expensive branded clothing and so on and so forth. Lots of the people, when they first get ordained, they would say that, this is my favorite ring. I spent so much money on it. Without it, I feel my finger even feel a little lonely. But anyhow, I have to give it up because now I am ordained. And then they would have to make offering of their previous possessions to the sangha. So anyhow, now they no longer have any adornments, no longer have any hair, and now you're wearing this kashaya, that is the tethered clothing, or red kasaya, or yellow, or the gray-colored kasaya. At the same time, holding and carrying the alms bowl to use in begging for your livelihood. Look at yourself in this way. Your life has completely transformed. You're no longer a lay practitioner. As a lay practitioner, you still have excuses to engage in all kinds of livelihoods and even competitions. But now you're a monastic. You have already chosen this path. It is not that you're forced into this path. It is that you've already chosen this path. Many people, in fact, requested to get ordained and kept on asking me to give them a blessing so that they can get ordained, and they wanted to be ordained. Then you should definitely remember your intention of getting ordained. Then the Buddha said that you should touch and rub your heads to remember this intention. And then the Buddha continued to say that if thoughts of arrogance arise in you, you should quickly destroy them, because arrogance and pride are not appropriate even among the customs of lay people. Whenever you generate the kind of arrogance, in fact, we should feel quite embarrassed about it. We did not get ordained because we want to be happy in this samsara. Rather, we get ordained to eradicate all kinds of arrogance and anger and jealousy. As a monastic, we shouldn't have that at all. We should give up all of our, for example, status and all of those kinds of things that mundane beings would seek for. Those are the actions of a monastic. In our mind stream, there should be no longer any harboring of arrogance and anger and jealousy, as well as all kinds of dualistic thoughts. Indeed, the teaching over here is of great supreme, especially to the monastics. We've already shaved off our hair out of our own intention and aspiration. And if our actions and arrogance as well as anger are worse than a lay practitioner, we should definitely be very much embarrassed and ashamed of ourselves. Today we've talked about indulging in sleeping and anger and arrogance. I really hope all of you contemplate upon the three things that we've studied. I hope that you can engage in discussion, engage in tutoring and mentoring to each other, and as well as contemplation. The teachings that's given over here are mainly towards the monastics. However, to the lay practitioners, you need to also contemplate along the same way. For the non-practitioners, if they can practice patience and eradicate their arrogance, then as the followers of the Buddha, as the practitioners of the Mahayana, why can't we practice patience? Why can't we be humble? We have to then use all of those kinds of requirements to look at ourselves and require upon ourselves. In this way, then our mind stream will definitely have certain transformations. We shouldn't listen to a teaching so that we only plant virtuous seeds. We definitely have to transform ourselves. For example, maybe your anger, maybe your sleep, maybe your indulgence, maybe your arrogance could decrease maybe a little bit. If you were to sleep for 8 hours before, maybe from tomorrow onwards you can sleep for 7 hours and a half, or 7 hours and 59 minutes. Then even if you decrease for that 1 minute, you are considered as successful.
Jirganan jiranon chupayi, chupam sonen jova churasho.